president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this week's issue of Trump Watch. The big news, of course, that everybody's discussing is the murder of Charlie Kirk at the hands of a 22-year-old guy that decided to take him out. President Trump is saying it's all because of the leftist rhetoric, anti-conservative rhetoric on campuses and elsewhere, and that this is what is triggering violence, political violence in America. And the left, of course, is saying that it's time for more gun control. And for me, all of this is ridiculous. Their analysis is ridiculous. If this was simply a matter of anger over political discourse, then how do they explain the mass killing of those children in that Catholic school in Minneapolis? Was the killer there upset over the political rhetoric of those children? I don't think so. And then you've got that murder of that woman on the train, where a guy, for whatever reason, decided to just take her out, killed her. You got massive killings in America. In other words, what people are really avoiding here is trying to get to the root of what's going on in this country. Because it's rather simplistic to say, oh, this guy just, got mad over the conservative rhetoric and he decided to do something about it. Really, what did he accomplish? Okay? I mean, notice that there's no logic here. That this 22-year-old guy has taken out, ended the life of a 31-year-old guy, and for what purpose? I mean, it's not like Charlie Kirk had political power where he was going to alter the course of history by killing this guy. He was just a campus leader, clearly, inspiring people, but ending his life doesn't really accomplish anything. And if the shooter were trying to change the course of history or the momentum of the United States, for example, let me point to a notable example. When the national security state assassinated President Kennedy, something that, of course, both the left and the right simply cannot bring themselves to confront, given the fact that they're wedded to the national security state, that way of life, that altered the course of history. It was clear that Kennedy was going to move America in a totally different direction from that desired by the Pentagon, the CIA, and the NSA. And so by assassinating him, they moved America in their direction, and they prevailed. To this day, they still move in this direction with the support of both the left and the right. So there's a logic behind that kind of assassination. But to kill a guy that's popular on campuses, what does it accomplish? I mean, look what he's done. He ended Kirk's life, but he also effectively ended his own life. He's 22 years old. It's essentially a suicide, because if he doesn't get the death penalty, he certainly will get life in prison without parole. And for what? What does that accomplish to have ruined his life? In fact, I read that this kid, when his father was trying to persuade him to turn himself in, he said, I think I'd rather commit suicide. Well, that's a fascinating insight, because it really goes to show you that I don't think there was a lot of thought that went into it. Ironically, his family was Republican. And so there's something wrong here. It's like a disconnect. And that brings up my thesis that I've raised for many, many years. But most people don't want to confront this. And I'm going to talk about why they don't want to confront it, including libertarians. Many libertarians do not want to confront my thesis, because my thesis puts everything into a whole. Their thesis, the one that says, oh, it's just political discourse, can't we all just get along here and accept that we have different political views and just participate harmoniously in the democratic process, doesn't explain the killing of those children, does it? There's no political discourse when it comes to the killing of those children. So the thesis that this guy, he's just angry over the right-wing discourse, it might work ostensibly in this case, although there's no logic to it, because the guy didn't accomplish anything with the murder, and he essentially ends his own life as a practical matter, either with the death penalty or life without parole. So I'm going to give my thesis. I've done it before in the past. Most people, it is my conviction, do not want to hear this thesis. They do not want to confront it, including many libertarians. And I'm going to explain why that is so. But I've decided that every time there's one of these irrational killings, I'm going to bring up my thesis, even if people don't want to consider it. So there's 4 factors here that are going on in America. If we want to talk about the deep meaning of this murder and the murder on that train and the kids and all the mass murders that are taking place, because remember, it's not just these killings that are a manifestation that something is dreadfully wrong with this society. It's a sick society. I don't see how anybody can deny that. If you look, for example, let's look at the manifestations before I give the 4 factors. You've got mass suicide rates, soaring suicide rates among young people. Okay, that's a strong sign that something is wrong with that society. Okay, it doesn't have anything to do with political discourse. It's just young people deciding to check out early out of life, which is really bizarre. When you're starting out in life, this is like a great adventure that, boy, you're leaving your parents and you're starting out in your life. It's exciting. And, one can understand why somebody 60 would commit suicide. All his dreams are dashed that he had when he was in his 20s. His marriage fell apart. His business went bankrupt. And all the bad things that happen during the course of a person's life. I wouldn't agree with it, but I can understand why somebody'd say, oh, man, I'm ready to go. But somebody that's 20, that makes no sense. There's also the massive drug addiction. They've been fighting this war on drugs all my life. Okay? All my life they've been fighting this war on drugs, which is saying it's a massive problem. Now, Trump says, it's because the drug dealers in Venezuela are attacking, which I guess what he means is that they're bringing in drugs and grabbing Americans and putting cocaine up their noses and injecting them with heroin. Well, that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. These are people who want mind-altering substances. That's a sign that something's wrong with that society. When massive numbers, enough to justify the continuation of a massive, deadly, and destructive government program that destroys our freedom. That's a sign that something's dreadfully wrong. And suicide rates among veterans soaring. Why veterans? We thank them for their service, don't we? Why would they be checking out? Oh, post-traumatic stress disorder, don't make me laugh. That has nothing to do with it. Okay? It's something deeper here that's going on in this society. Massive alcohol rates that are maybe on the same level as in the Soviet Union. Which should give us a sign of what the cause of this dysfunctionality is. Now, as many of you know, I've long argued that there's people in society that are what I call off kilter. They're not insane in the sense of the legal sense of the term, but there's something not right. They're just off kilter, but they don't bother anybody. When I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, there was off-kilter people in my hometown of Laredo, Texas. They didn't bother anybody. You could see they were off-kilter. But a lot of the off-kilter people, you don't know they're off-kilter. Like this 22-year-old guy that killed this guy, I would say he's off-kilter. He grows up in a Republican family. They start talking politics, and all of a sudden, he goes off and says, I'm going to assassinate this guy with a deer rifle. Okay? It's like, it makes no sense. What is he going to accomplish with this? That's what I call an off-kilter killing, where there's like, it doesn't make any sense as to what he's doing here. Why end a life and why ruin your own life? For no purpose. What has he accomplished by ruining the one life he's given? He's ruined it because he's going to spend it the rest of his life in jail. And I'm sure he's sitting there, I would assume, in jail saying, what have I done? Why did I do that? A classic off-kilter guy that gets triggered And it very well may have been the discourse that triggered it, but it doesn't make any sense. I think there's deeper meaning here that people do not want to delve into. They want to just make it superficial. Oh, we got to clamp down on the campuses. Oh, we got to force people to have the right rhetoric. And that doesn't get to the real meaning of what's going on, especially when you consider that woman that was on that train. She wasn't talking politics when she got killed. What's going on with that? What about those children? Okay, and all the other mass killings. All right, so something triggers something in these off-kilter people, like that guy on the train. No motive at all. Well, why did he kill this woman? Now, she's an immigrant. Maybe that's a factor, because we all know that there's a war on immigrants taking place. Did he know that she was an immigrant? Maybe it's a copycat killing. But it had nothing to do with political discourse. And the children, no political discourse. What's going on there? Something triggered that guy that said, I'm going to go kill these children. And then he kills himself. Okay, so suicide, murder. So here are the 4 factors. And like I say, they're not popular. People don't want to hear it, including many libertarians. But I'm going to go over them anyway. And when there's these off-kilter killings, I'm going to repeat them. I'm going to keep repeating them because I have absolutely no doubts over the years. It started out as a thesis. And as I started reflecting on it deeper and deeper, started writing about it, I became increasingly convinced that I'm right. That this is what's going on in American society. But like I say, most people don't want to confront that, including libertarians, many libertarians, because they're wedded to the systems that are involved here. Now, let me start out with the systems. We've got some really bad systems in America under which we're living. And I'm going to enumerate some of them. We've got the welfare state system, okay? That you've got where the government takes money from one group of people and gives it to another group of people, enforced by the Internal Revenue Service, the income tax. The crown jewels of the welfare state are Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. And this is what I'm talking about how many libertarians do not want to confront this because they're wedded to Social Security and Medicare, just like conservatives and liberals. And they want to reform it, or they want to gradually get rid of it over the next 50 years, but they want to keep it in existence for the rest of their lives. So they want this welfare state system, and so they don't want to consider the idea of dismantling this system. Now remember, this is a new system. That is, it was not part of the United States for over 100 years. And so that's a big system that most everyone is wedded to. They want that system. You bring it up on some kind of forum about abolishing Social Security and Medicare, and everybody goes ballistic. Oh my gosh, you hate the poor, you hate the elderly, you hate everybody, you know. And then there's the national security state system, which is actually even worse. But this is one where people are totally wedded to the national security state system, including many libertarians, unfortunately. Oh, they'll say, oh, we got to reduce military spending. Oh, we got to reform the CIA. Virtually nobody touches the NSA. It sort of sits there quietly. But the fact is, this is a new-fangled governmental system. President Eisenhower pointed that out in his farewell address. It was no part of America's system for over 100 years. Our ancestors rejected this kind of way of life. They called it standing armies. It's the same thing as a national security state. Omnipotent powers, assassination, torture, indefinite detention, despite what the Constitution and the Bill of Rights says. But people are wedded to this. You bring up the idea of dismantling the national security state, privatizing, selling off the Pentagon, and man, people go ballistic. Who would keep us safe from the terrorists and the Muslims and the drug dealers and the Russians and the Chinese? And it's all been inculcated in their mind that they need the national security state. And you can see it in the polls, the tremendous respect that people have for the military apparatus. And so that's your second system. You got the drug war system. Okay, we've seen that all my life. They've been fighting this drug war. And now President Trump is over there having soldiers commit what I call, and what in my opinion is murder on the high seas. It's just clear, cold-blooded murder. I mean, he's killing people who are suspected of committing drug offenses. That's murder. I mean, if the DEA started shooting people that were suspected of violating drug laws here, they'd be indicted for murder. But because Trump has gone through this little ruse of saying, well, I've designated him a terrorist and I've got soldiers fighting the drug war. He says, oh, I can get away with it. And I think he can get away with it because the courts are never going to oppose, and I've said this forever, they're never going to oppose anything that involves the national security establishment. Because the national security establishment is in charge of the federal government, especially when it comes to things like the drug war, at least in overseas matters, external affairs, NATO, Ukraine. It's the Pentagon and the CIA and the NSA that are running the show. And the courts have known this. The federal courts have known this since at least the time of the Kennedy assassination, but even before. And they've made it clear they will never buck any operation that involves the national security establishment. The national security establishment is in charge. And so Trump knows this. So by getting soldiers involved, doing police work, because that's what the drug war is police work, he knows that the courts won't get involved. And then by calling it the war on terrorism, oh, he's a terrorist. I mean, imagine if federal agents, caught a guy doing interstate shipment of stolen goods, and they just shot him, killed him. The guy that is disarmed, unarmed, doesn't have any guns. That would be murder. But if Trump were to say, I designate that guy a terrorist, kill him, and then he got not an FBI agent, but a soldier to do the killing, he's off free. There's no murder there anymore because there's the Justice Department's not going to get involved because it's the military and the courts are not going to get involved. So you got that drug war, and then you've got immigration controls. Okay, we've had this system again all my life. Police state along the border, massive police state that's now expanding. You got troops in various cities, and Trump is sending out more troops, and you've got masked people. You got like the Gestapo that are stopping on the side of the road there on a sidewalk and grabbing somebody and putting them in an unmarked car by people that don't have uniforms. I mean, this is weird stuff, okay? But these are just some of the systems that we have that have become permanent part of American life. And nobody wants to let go of them. I mean, okay? Now, that's factor one, bad system. Number two, a tightening of the screws. So you see all these systems, the government is tightening the screws on the American people. Tightening and tightening and tightening. I mean, when you've got troops in American cities, after having a police state along the border with highway checkpoints and a Berlin Wall and barbed wire in the water and roving border patrol checkpoints, and now it starts expanding nationwide, that's when the true screws are tightening on American society. But nobody wants to recognize the screws that are tightening. They see the troops in the cities, and they see the raids, and they see businesses that are being raided by armed agents, masked, and the kidnappings on the side of the road and stuff. They don't want to recognize that the government is tightening the screws. But you see, that's what's happening with those off-kilter people. They can feel the screws being tightened, even if Americans can't, regular Americans. Because, regular Americans can deal with this. I mean, okay, when we disagree with what the government's doing as a libertarian, when I disagree, like the war on immigrants or the war on drugs, I do what I do. I write articles. I can't change the course of history, but I can stand for what's right, and that's what I do. I write articles. I do this program, Trump Watch. I express my conviction of what's going on here. But the off-kilter person cannot do that. Something gets triggered in him where he's not satisfied with just writing articles or doing a podcast or whatever. He's going out and doing something really bad, initiating violence. But I suggest it's because the screws are tightening on. Now, I feel the screws too, And, I traveled to Cuba many, many years ago, and I could feel when I got there. The average tourist can't feel it. But as a libertarian, I could feel the screws are very tight in Cuba. You could just tell the way people would come up to you and say, hey, can I talk to you? Because I was doing interviews. But they would look around. Now, when you're looking around, you know that there's screws that are very, very tight in that society. Okay, so that's factor two. Then you've got the denial of reality on freedom. And this is the big one, that they inculcate people with the idea that this is a free society. And this is where where the right wing really falls for this. I mean, you go into any right wing meeting and they'll do the Pledge of Allegiance and sing the Star Spangled Banner, and they're convinced they live in a free society, but so are people on the left. And so when you believe something that's a false reality, you're going to have psychosis. Now, most people can deal with the psychosis. You know, they just convince themselves that there's problems, that they'll take drugs. Okay, massive drug problem in America. What's that all about? I say it's over a massive psychosis over believing something that's not real. And from the first grade in the government-approved schools that we're all sent to, we were at least back in the 50s and 60s, we were inculcated with the notion that this is a free society. Americans are free, unlike people in North Korea and Cuba and Russia and China. You know, we're free. And we all believed it because the indoctrination is complete. When you're going every day and you're saying the Pledge of Allegiance with liberty and justice for all, you really believe it. And I believed it. I was convinced until the day I discovered libertarianism. And it was unbelievable, the experience. I mean, I found these 4 little books on libertarian essays on compromising principled libertarianism. And this is why we maintain a principled and compromising approach here, because to me, it's the only way to break through the inches-thick indoctrination that encases people's minds. You're not free, okay? And when I discovered that, it was just the weirdest experience. I could feel the indoctrination just cracking apart and being able to see reality, that this is not a free society. But when you convince kids it's free, and they get to be 20 and they say, God, this is freedom. This is the best there is. Forget it. I'm checking out. And I often wonder if all those kids were to discover that this is not freedom, they've been lied to. It's indoctrination, it's propaganda. Would it make a difference? And I think it would, because then they could say, oh, okay, so this is not the best there is. Hey, we want to get involved with libertarianism and bring freedom to America. But I would say there's this massive, massive denial of reality, especially among the well-to-do Republicans. I mean, they are convinced we live in a free society. They are convinced that Trump is making America great again. And he's not, because he can't. It's not something, a slight on him. When you've got all these bad systems that destroy freedom, the drug war, the immigration controls, the tightening of the screw, all of this is the denial of freedom. It's the serfdom where the screws are tightening and everybody says, thank God I'm an American, because at least I know I'm free. And then finally, the fourth factor is the killing machine, the massive killing machine that exists within the U.S. government. I don't know how many millions the U.S. government has killed in my lifetime, but it's enormous. Millions and millions of people that they've killed with the national security state. So it all starts fitting together, you see. You've got the national security state, massive killing machine, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, and a war on terrorism, war on drugs. I mean, look at the killings that are taking place right there in Venezuela or in Venezuelan waters. Those are just killings of people that deserve to live. And you've got Ukraine, where they provoked Russia into attacking with the idea of degrading Russia and then saying, oh, Russia's the attacker, Russia's the attacker. Yeah, well, let's look at your role with NATO in provoking this war, the same way they did back in 1979 when they provoked and induced Russia to invade Afghanistan. At least they admitted to that one, I think, later on when Brzezinski, the former national security advisor, says, yeah, of course we did it. It was a great trap we sent for the Russians because we gave them their own Vietnam. And that's what they've done with Ukraine and sacrificed Ukrainian citizens and the whole country in the process. But a massive killing machine. And the attitude's always been that as long as they're killing people over there, and there's not a massive loss of American life, like in Vietnam, 58,000 American men sacrificed for nothing, that Americans just butt out. You know, they don't want to think about that. It's over there. That's their job, to kill. And it would never affect American society. And I always said that's not going to happen. It will affect it. It'll seep into the veins, the pores, the consciousness, subconsciousness of the American people, and it would seep into the people who are off kilter. so that they end up killing people, just copycat killing, like the national security establishment. So as long as you have this killing machine overseas, you're going to have these irrational killings here. I've said this time and time again, but people don't want to hear it. No, Jacob, we're not going to consider that. We're going to talk about political discourse and how Republicans hate Democrats and vice versa, and how can't we all just get along here? Can't we just all get along and have tolerance for each other's views? And no, we're not going to address what you're talking about, Jacob, because we believe in these systems. You see? And so you put all the systems together with the destruction of freedom, because there is no freedom in the United States because of these systems. Okay? I mean, look at the IRS. You know, the IRS continues tightening the screws, tightening the screws, tightening the screws. There wasn't an IRS for, over 100 years in American history. But we got it. It's going to enforce the income tax. It seizes a large portion of people's income, terrifies people. Every April 15th, people get scared. We got to get our tax return. Nobody filed tax returns for over 100 years. Okay? So the tightening of the screws, the IRS tightens the screws, just like the DEA tightens the screws, just like the ICE people and the immigration people tighten the screws, troops in American cities. But it's all freedom. Thank God I'm an American, because at least I know I'm free. Okay? So you put all this together, there's your dysfunctionality. There's your off-kilter people committing murders for no apparent motive and no logic. No, like, this is what I've accomplished here. And killing children. What's that all about? And then the suicide rate and the massive drug addiction rate. You put these four factors together, to me, there's your answer right there. And there's your solution too. If you want a solution, this country's got to engage in some serious soul searching and confront what I'm talking about here. That this country has brought into existence bad systems, immoral systems, evil systems. The systems that I mentioned, plus more. That were not part of America's founding governmental system. And everybody's assuming that everything would work out fine, using all this initiation of force to force people to be good, caring, and compassionate with welfare state programs like Social Security and Medicare. When people deny reality there, they say, oh no, it's a retirement program, Jacob, I put my money in, I'm getting my own money out. Total denial of reality. And then the drug war, oh, Jacob, victory's right around the corner. Yeah, we've been fighting this thing for decades, but victory's right around the corner, Jacob. And oh my gosh, we can get rid of all these immigrants and not have a police state nationwide, Jacob. Don't pay attention to those troops, Jacob. They're just there. They're our friends, Jacob. Those troops are our friends. And so this is what's going on. And when it's all freedom, you see, it's all freedom. You do a poll of the American people, especially those that have graduated from public schools, 12 years of public schools, I will guarantee you the vast majority would say, thank God I'm an American, because at least I know I'm free. You put all this together and the massive killing machine overseas, there's your reason for all these irrational killings and the triggering of the off-kilter people. And so there's only one real solution to this, but a solution that people don't want to confront, including many libertarians, because they're wedded to these systems. They want to reform them. They want to make them work. There's no question about that. They want to make the immigration system more benign. Let's all get along here, okay? They want the off-kilter people to just stop engaging in those murders. They want the drug war to finally succeed and people stop taking drugs, so the DEA doesn't have anything to do. And the welfare state, they want it to all work. $37 trillion in debt and climbing, but it'll work out. Massive debasement of the currency. There's another system, paper money system. It can't work. It's inherently defective. It's a rotten add-on systems that they added on in the 20th century to what had been a limited government republic, like let's say in 1890. Not a perfect system by any means, because we're humans. You can't achieve perfection when you're a human, but pretty darn good. No income tax, paper money, Federal Reserve, drug war, welfare state, income tax, IRS, immigration controls to speak of. On and on. And so if you get rid of these systems, dismantle these systems, and leave a limited government republic with a free market economy, now all of a sudden there's no more screw. The screws are not tightened because the screws are not there anymore. Now you're talking about a genuinely free society where people are free to live their lives, take care of their families on their own, voluntary charity, ingest whatever they want to ingest if they want to without the screws being tightened, and people getting murdered on the high seas or being put in jail for 30, 40, 50 years. People are free to cross borders peacefully, engage in commerce, just like normal human beings, like a normal life. Now we're talking about genuine freedom. And then everything starts to become normalized instead of all these mass irrational killings, because the off-kilter people are now, they're not getting triggered anymore by the tightening of the screws and all these dysfunctional systems. And the denial of reality, where people start recognizing, okay, now we're talking about genuine freedom instead of this false freedom that came through government indoctrination in the public schools and that lasts sometimes all the way to a person's deathbed. And then you don't have this massive killing machine anymore because you don't have a national security state anymore. You have a limited government republic, which was our founding governmental system. You don't have a CIA, DEA, NSA, Pentagon, massive military-industrial complex. So there's your solution. But is it easy? Of course not. And the reason it's so difficult is because so many people, including libertarians, are just wedded to these systems. They want to reform them, they want to fix them, they want to make them work. And they come up with all their plans, but they will never work. Because something that is inherently evil, inherently immoral, inherently defective cannot be made to work. And so as long as you maintain these systems and the tightening of the screws that comes with this system and the denial of reality that this is all freedom, and you got this massive killing machine, you're going to have these irrational killings. So they're not going to stop. Everybody needs to just be aware of that. We're just getting going because the screw is getting tight. The screws are being tightened ever more to make this system work when it cannot work. It's inherently defective. That's Trump Watch this week. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for your great support of FFF. And, oh, by the way, we've got our Civil Liberties Conference series of talks that we're getting geared up starting in October. More information on that later. Thank you again, and I'll see you next week.